Welcome to the Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zack Cherry. With me as always.
Say, are you about a size 14? Eddie of Edward is Truth.
And today we're talking about The Silence of the Lambs, released February 14th, 1991. This is a Valentine's movie. Inadvertently.
Can you believe that it hasn't already been requelled as just Silence of the Lambs with no "the" in front of it yet?
It's really strange that, well, when you say requel, it's just like retitled. I'm
right.
assuming what you mean. Yeah, because nobody calls it The Silence of the Lambs. They just say Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And it makes more sense that way. But I guess like the Thomas Harris book has the in front of it, so we have to do the. But it's just so jarring to say it with The Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, I had to look it up when I was writing it down, going like, is it a "the" or is it a? And it is a "the" on IMDb, and even in the opening credits and everything like that. I don't know. It's a little trivia for you kids. It is "the." It's not just Silence of the Lambs or a
silence. Well, then it would be like Silence of a Lamb or The Silence of a Lamb. Yeah.
I like that sounds poetic.
Clarice's Lamb.
Just Clarice's Lamb. That's the only one.
Speaking of the opening credits, were you getting like a Twin Peaks?
Yes.
Just the font.
And also the foggy kind of like unforgiving trees, and everything like that. The chill in the air that you can catch just watching her like go through, her obstacle course and whatnot. Yeah, well, absolutely.
When this came out, like Twin Peaks would have still been on, as far as I know. So like, because it ran 2 seasons initially, and then the movie, the prequel movie, came out in 1992. So this and it was like a really popular series at the time. So it just seems like it was maybe somewhat evocative of that.
I wonder. See, it's funny that you bring that up, because with the opening credits, what also stood out to me, and I think it stands out to me when I watch Twin Peaks as well, was the kind of sweeping melodramatic score that just kind of like adds so much to the tone. Like you could literally kind of put any score under there, but Howard Shore wrote the music for this one. And I just love how much it introduces you to the weight of and almost like the grandiosity of what it is you're about to behold, because everything that the camera is showing you is pretty austere. But so I think they're, in an odd way, Jonathan Demme and Howard Shore are kind of setting us up to embrace the realism when it's being employed in the filmmaking, and then also to embrace the more operatic moments, because there are some very art house moments in this film.
My favorite, because this is an excellent score as well, and I feel like there was we talked about what was it called, the one I didn't like, drag me to hell.
Oh, that one. Okay.
We failed to mention that the score was Christopher Young.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Was it? Was it Christopher Young? I can't remember.
Oh, you didn't even. If it isn't, then sorry, Christopher Young, and sorry whoever did the score for Drag Me to Hell.
Now I gotta look it up real quick. But no, my favorite musical cue in this particular movie is.
Which one?
In Silence of the Lambs. The last scene when she picks up the phone and then he's sitting there wherever he is, like was it like Cuba?
Yeah, I don't know. It could be Cuba. It could be Bermuda. Some
but
islands.
just sort of like there's very mysterious quality to that particular cue, and that kind of like takes us into the big reveal of the end of him just like walking away and disappearing into the crowd of people, which was just so effective.
Oh yeah. Did you find it yet?
No, I'm looking now. But
okay, I'll keep talking while you look. It's because
No,
Howard
I was
Shore.
just sad that we didn't mention that and it is Christopher Young that did Drag Me to Hell.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
that we've covered so many movies now, we're just like, oh, I really like the score, and then we go and look, and it's Christopher Young, and that was like one of like because I was shit talking that movie a lot when we did that podcast, and it's just like, I want to sing the praises to the things that I like, and I think that the score in the movie was pretty good, and of course Christopher Young did the Hellraiser 1 and 2, The Grudge 1 and 2, Urban Legend. He did Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Sinister actually was another one. So there's Sinister. He's had a huge illustrious career with the horror genre, and it's like usually if there's a memorable score, he's the one behind it.
And now he's weeping into his latte, like because he wasn't mentioned. he follows the cherry picker, and he listened to the Drag Me to Hell. He's like, oh, I can't wait for them to shout me out, and then went, oh my god.
Yeah.
And then
and we have literally every other podcast. But yeah, the Howard Shore is it Howard Shore?
Howard Shore for this one.
Howard
Shore has also had a prolific career. He early on he did Scanners, he did Cronenberg's The Fly and Naked Lunch, which is a favorite of mine because whenever people like go like, oh, I love weird filmmakers, Tim Burton's the best. I'm like, okay, then you don't know weird film. Watch Naked Lunch, watch Cronenberg, and tell me you still think you're like weird film. But anyway,
I've
he also
never
did Panic
seen
Room, another Jodie Foster. Oh, yeah.
No, I was gonna say I've never seen Naked Lunch, but I'm not like a huge Cronenberg fan.
Oh God,
Yeah.
I mean,
he's an acquired taste.
Sure. I mean, I adore him. So
I mean, so many of the greats are like David Lynch. Like we're talking about Twin Peaks. Like that's a lot of people can't
talk about weird.
Like his stuff. So
I think
that
have an appetite for subjectivity if you want to enjoy some David Lynch.
Tim Burton is like weird in a very cartoonish way, and I think that's more palatable for a lot of people, and for kids as well. So he taps more into like
he's great gateway weird. Like good if you're like, oh, I think I like weird cinema. Cool. It's fine to like Tim Burton, but continue the evolution. Seek out other filmmakers that maybe push a little farther. Try a little Guillermo del Toro or something.
Well, what do you think of Jonathan Demme?
Jonathan Demme, actually, is pronounced.
Jonathan Demme Moore.
Jonathan Demme Moore. Now we're going to call him that the whole pod. He does not deserve that, but Jonathan. Maybe I'll just call him Johnny. Yeah. Johnny.
JD.
Johnny D.
Yeah.
JD. I like JD. I have to say, like, his catalog is incredibly varied. I think because prior to this film, he made a movie called Married to the Mob, which was a comedy with Michelle Pfeiffer in the lead, where she's married to Alec Baldwin, who I haven't seen it in years, but if I remember correctly, he's a gangster and he gets killed. So she's on the run, living under like an assumed name, like trying to outrun the mob, basically. And what's his name? The little. The impish guy with the high voice who's in all the movies. I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, there's this guy who plays
Joe
like
Pesci?
No, not that impish. Matthew Modine with the voice.
Okay.
Because he's sitting there and he plays this kind of square FBI guy who's undercover and trying to kind of like win his way into her life so he can observe her and find out what her plan is, because they think she's still affiliated with the mob. And this is taking way too long to explain. This is longer than the premise for the movie we're discussing. Anyway, it was a comedy, but also very strange because it's Michelle Pfeiffer and she's playing the dire straits that the woman is in. So you get all these extreme, like almost soap opera highs and lows. And Michelle Pfeiffer, to bring it back to Silence of the Lambs, was actually Jonathan Demme's first choice to play Clarice Starling when he was putting this film together, because they worked well together. She's an incredibly dependable actor. She read the script and rejected it because she said she thought it was too dark for her. At least that's what I've read. I haven't seen her say these words, so it could be hearsay. But she did reject it.
I'm glad she did.
Me too.
Because I don't think that she would be right for the part, because it doesn't. And I don't think it's because it's too dark for her. It's just what she brings, because we're huge Michelle Pfeiffer fans, and
yes, we are.
I don't think that. Not that she can't be serious, because I've seen Michelle Pfeiffer take on very serious roles, but she's almost like too much of a siren, that it would be like a little distracting. Like Jodie Foster is hot.
Yeah.
And you can definitely see that, like, this is like the first woman that has like gone down to that dungeon, and that Hannibal Lecter has seen in so long, that he would kind of like have this fascination and this attraction to her. But if it was Michelle Pfeiffer, just like be like there'd be nothing like deeper than that. Just be like, oh my gosh, like Michelle Pfeiffer walks into any room, like everyone is gonna turn their head.
They're all just going to stand agog and just I mean, it would have been this is what I'll say. I mean, it would have been an incredibly different dynamic, because I think the success of this film, there are a lot of reasons I think this film is successful, but I think that the reason it's as prolific as it was is because of the tightrope that Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins walk together. It's almost like a tandem bike they're riding across a tightrope,
Yeah.
And if one of them does something different, as evinced in, What's Followed, we saw someone else take on the role, someone who we sang the praises of in our last After Dark episode, Julianne Moore, and we won't go into that, but it changed the dynamic, certainly. I mean, she had a different script she was working with, but even if you put Julianne Moore in this movie, it changes everything. It changes everything about the way that character
and we'll talk about that when we do a Hannibal podcast, but you're absolutely right. Like I think that Anthony Hopkins and Michelle Pfeiffer would have excellent chemistry. Have they been in a movie together?
Not that I can recollect at the moment.
I think that they would have excellent chemistry, but it wouldn't be the right chemistry for what this movie needed. And I think that Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins is the optimal pairing of anyone who could play these characters.
Especially the way there is an eternal power struggle between the two of them, but it's almost like watching a friendly diplomatic arm wrestling match. But because one is always trying to kind of like gain the upper hand on the other, and one is always succeeding over the other, just in terms of whether it's Clarice getting Hannibal to drop his guard or Hannibal getting Clarice to drop her guard. You can almost feel like the little ka-chings in their heads when they're maneuvering to try and get the other to disclose something that they need. Whether it's something, in Clarice's case, something she needs to solve this case and get closer to the identity of the killer, or whether it's something Hannibal needs because he is a monster manipulator and he is a brilliant genius to the point of madness, and wandering around inside people's psyches is probably the only real challenge that he enjoys rising to. Also, I'd put it akin to his delectable taste for like the finer things in life, like art, music, fine cuisine, the things that he, even the sketchings, that he does. Like, he seems to just want to surround himself with things he's creating. Or things other people have been, and he's drawn to other creators, and I think he sees a builder in Clarice Starling, and that's something he admires about her. Yeah,
and I think what's great as well with the performances here, which were both nominated and won Best Actor, Best Actress, which is interesting because I think normally. For the amount of screen time that Anthony Hopkins has, would he not have been qualified for a supporting actor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't count the minutes, but I do know for a fact. Like, I mean, he is definitely more like on the supporting end in terms of like how he serves the story.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's why when you hear stories about actors like counting pages that their characters' names are on, or even counting lines and arguing my character isn't in this enough, it's not about that. It's about what you do with what you're given, and less can be a gift.
But
sometimes,
what I was gonna say, because I mean, it feels like he's not in a whole lot of this movie, but you know, whenever he is, he commands the screen, and he doesn't take away from her. Like, she's right there with him, and I think that, you know, even though these are two performances, it's almost like there's three performances, because there is Jodie Foster playing Clarice Starling, there is Anthony Hopkins playing Dr. Lecter, and then there's both of them playing off of one another, because and we kind of zigzag through like all these different variations of them in scenes, and I mean, it's when they're together, it's always going to be the most dynamic. But I mean, it got to the point in the movie where we're kind of with him for a while, when like during his escape scene, and that was probably the part of the movie that I got the most hooked into, because I've seen this movie a million times. This to me is like a perfect movie. It's 5 stars. So I had it on last night, and I was just, you know, I was doing other things, but it was on. I was paying enough attention. But when that part of the movie came on, I was hooked in. And it's funny because you'll hear people talk about the bait and switch that happens later on in the film with the wrong address, or the wrong people, like just the way that they set
identity,
that up.
yeah.
And I mean, it's fine. It's all well and good. I think it's done much better in this movie than it has been in other movies that have tried to replicate it. Sure. You know, I always had a problem with Jack Crawford saying Clarice. Like, for some reason, he knew that she was at the house. But it's weird that like that scene, that bait and switch, always gets kind of more praise or just more attention, when I think that like the way that when he escapes and does the whole switcheroo with one of the guards, that is not the scene in the movie that's kind of like, oh my god, because the way that they frame it and everything that's going on, they're pulling the guy out of the precinct, and the whole time you're just thinking it's him. You don't know that. Like, if you're seeing it for the first time, that twist is so effective, and it's still so effective after seeing it a million times, that when you know that you get to the ambulance and he pulls the respirator off, and then the face, and it's just like, holy shit, like that is so much more effective than the Clarice showing up at Buffalo Bill's. But they're both great scenes.
Yeah, I think they both. I appreciate both of the sequences. I think, maybe the mixed identities with Clarice at Buffalo Bill's address, and then everyone else out in Chicago in a place that's just like, you know, a dead end. I think it's probably the most effective. I'd say for me, it was the most effective like the first 2 or 3 times that I saw the movie. And now that I can see it coming, like with big, bright, you know, traffic lights, you know, and I'm standing in the oncoming traffic lane. It's not as shocking. It's just kind of like one more thing for me to just kind of go like, oh, you know, like just another reason why this film especially I think works like the first time. I remember the first time I saw it, I went, oh, you know, big old gay gasp. And but the face and all of that. It's also because it made me think about an acting teacher that I had for many years who would reference that often in class when talking about like not posturing, or kind of like you beginning with a result when you move into a scene, and used Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter as an example so many times, particularly with the way he gets free and uses that police baton to beat that one officer when he's handcuffed to the bars of the cage that Hannibal's
it's almost
in.
like he's because like right after that he's kind of like almost composing to the music that's playing.
Yes.
And it's just like the way that he handles the baton, it's so like artful as he's like kind of like whipping it back and forth, that it is like he's like conducting an orchestra at that moment.
And that's one of the as ifs, to use a actor term. But that's one of the things that my teacher would bring up. He'd also say there's got to be some measure, and I don't know if this was based off of like research he had already done himself in like an interview with Anthony Hopkins, because I haven't found that footage or article yet. But he would always reference like making love. And watching it in this particular screening, of course, that was going in my head, and I watched him, and just like how can I put it? Just the intensity. If you look at the conducting motions also as thrusts, but like, instead of the pelvis, you're using your arm, it can become very, very phallic if you wanted to, but also just like the intensity, that visceral quality that, through like kind of clenched teeth and exhalation, because he's also maintaining himself a bit, almost like so he doesn't, climax too soon.
Okay.
That's the only way I can put it. I mean, because there is some restraint there, because also you have to keep in mind, and I think Anthony Hopkins was smart enough to keep this in mind. He reads every script that he does whenever he does a movie or a play. He says he reads it at least 100 times to pay attention to details and things. And I know that he knew Hannibal Lecter's heart rate can't go above, well, I don't remember what the number was, but 84? Something like
when
that.
When he bit the nurse's nose in the...
Yeah.
Or what,
so that means when he...
I don't think we saw it. Like, we see it in the next movie, but it's just mentioned here.
No, but I mean, just in terms of like, okay, so now that this is a man who can commit these atrocious, violent acts, but it's not about being a monster. It's not about like, you can't let your adrenaline go above a certain point, because that's not the way this man kills. And just that attention to detail throughout this film is, I think, one of the things that makes it legendary, dare I say it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, very much so. All right. Before we move on, just some housekeeping stuff. I want to shout out some new supporters of the Patreon and or my main YouTube channel. So hello to Dementio the Clown, Zachary Mejia, Claire Bogan, Philip Morgan, Katie Overturf, and Janine LC. So welcome aboard, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate it. If you too would like to support the podcast, you can head over to my Patreon, Zack Cherry, ZackCherry, and support us there. All tiers get you early access to new episodes the week before. And if you are supporting us on the Freddy Krueger tier, you'll have access to the Cherry Picker After Dark, which comes out every month. Last month we did Final Girls originals versus remake, and that was actually it was a fun episode. And actually our editor, Boy Cried Wolf, told me as much. Cool. Yesterday. Yeah, it was a really good episode. So I appreciate that. And I would also like to return the favor to him and thank him for all the wonderful editing that he does for us every week. So thank you very much, Boy Cried Wolf. With that said, we don't have a plan yet for this month, but rest assured when we do, we will let everyone know. Moving on, do you have a premise for Silence of the Lambs? The Silence of the Lambs?
Yes, I do.
Right. Excellent.
Should I Lecter this, or shall I Buffalo Bill it? What would you prefer?
I think that you should go with your gut instinct on this one.
Maybe open with it's 2 sentences. Maybe the first be... Oh, you know what? I'll open with Buffalo Bill, and then I'll close as Lecter.
Sure.
Okay. All right. A young FBI cadet named Clarice Starling must receive the help of an incarcerated and manipulative cannibal killer, Hannibal Lecter, to help catch another serial killer dubbed Buffalo Bill by the news media. But as Starling engages in quid pro quo exchanges, will Lecter also help confront past trauma, aiding her ultimately in the silence of the lambs? Ah,
Very nice.
thank you.
I'm impressed.
Oh, that's nice. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Didn't practice.
No, it's good.
I never
Well, I mean,
do.
you're really good at the New Englander accent. And now you're just making me picture like a version of Silence of the Lambs where Betty Davis is Dr. Hannibal Lecter.
Oh my God. Oh,
And then
so close.
And then, of course, Joan Crawford would have to play Clarice Starling.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, stop it.
We fan cast things here, so you know.
Oh my God. I'd watch that in a heartbeat.
And then the Buffalo Bill voice. you start. My favorite line that his delivery is when she does come to the door and just like, do you know about this girl? And she's like, oh wait, was that great big fat girl?
Right. Was she a great big fat person? Yeah. Like with this grin. And
yeah.
It's like, everything about this is yuck, sir.
And so this is some fun side trivia. Seth Green, who does the voice of Chris Griffin on Family Guy, Buffalo Bill is the inspiration for that character's voice.
What?
Yeah, I guess that he, like, back in his Robot Chicken days, like, he would, play with these voices and be like, what if Buffalo Bill was, I guess, like, how he described it is, like, if he was, like, a school bus driver, or he, like, worked at, like, the McDonald's fast food, like, just, like, what would he be saying? And then that sort of, like, evolved into the way that Chris would speak, and just like the affectation in his voice
with a little bit higher pitch. I'm trying to think what it's a meld of, because he's up here, but I'm trying to think like Buffalo Bill.
But there's sometimes where Chris will like go a lot lower, and especially when they're doing like the cutaways that of like weird shit. Like there's one they actually did a Silence of the Lambs riff not too long ago, because they were doing like a whole episode where it was like a clip show where they were doing like Oscar baity movies where they would just like have the characters from Family Guy play everyone. So they did one for Silence of the Lambs, and Chris was obviously Buffalo Bill.
Let's not go to that Denny's. Let's go to the good Denny's. Yeah.
Well, Well, what you did just there was more Gary Oldman as Mason.
Yeah, I could feel it starting to slide into Hannibal territory. Anyway, but okay, that's interesting. I'll have to go back and watch the entire series again and just.
Oh God, that's a lot of
this time. In terms of just like the opening of this movie, because we've already addressed many things, but just a few other things. One thing that jumped out at me that I guess I've noticed before, but sometimes you need to be reminded because it isn't quite as legendary. There's so many moments that are in this movie. Mm-hmm. But it was just the signs as Clarice was making her way through the woods of hurt, agony, pain, love, and a hyphen that says it, that I think is supposed to just read love it. Like love the hurt, love the agony, love the pain. But I thought, wouldn't it be funny if instead it was like signed Pennywise, like it, like, but also at the bottom of all that is like a withered, kind of like signpost. It looks like it's been like burned or worn away or something that says pride, almost kind of like as a visual cue to let you know that that's something you have to leave behind. And I thought this movie, I love how bold it can be, because there are so many times where it doesn't mask things terribly well. It's actually quite blunt with its symbolism and with kind of like its guideposts throughout the film. And I thought that was one of them. There were literal signs to equip Clarice with like what lay ahead for her, as long as she was prepared to feel hurt, agony, and pain, and to love it. At least to love it enough to keep returning to it, like love the pursuit and abandon pride, which is one of the things that makes her so interesting as a character. I don't think she ever sacrifices her backbone, but she certainly, I think, endures quite a bit, particularly from Lecter, but from all the men who are actually kind of like lording power over her throughout the film. And she steps up when it matters, and at I think the appropriate time even. Do you know what I mean when I talk about that?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay. Well, I mean, like, there's one example that I think of in terms of when they're pursuing the girl, Frederica Bimmel.
Yeah.
And they find her body and everything like that. And then she goes to the funeral home. That's the lobby, I guess, area is full of cops, and she's there with Jack Crawford, and he makes some kind of comment because he needs to get to this I don't know, sergeant or whatever, the cop in charge. He needs to get him kind of like sequestered so they can like speak frankly and everything like that. And he uses her presence. Just like there's a few kind of like delicate things that have happened to Frederica Bimmel. So, and he just kind of like motions over to Clarice, like, she's too fragile to deal with this. So could we just kind of like be alone? And she just sits there and kind of, she holds her tongue because this is about the mission and it's important. And also that's her boss, talking right now. But at the same time, as soon as they leave, the room full of male cops all seem to be looking down their nose at her. Like, oh, look who's too fragile to deal with, the details of her job. Like, like they're all just completely. And then when she tries later, like in the very next scene, when they're all kind of like occupying the room that the corpse is in, she asks them to leave, and they pay her no respect. They all just kind of stand there like, is she asking us to go? And she has to ask them again, politely, but with a bit more emphasis. And they start to slowly just kind of peter out, and she thanks them, for cooperating with her. And what I love is on the way out, on the way back, when they're in the car leaving, that's when she says to Crawford, he's like, I hope you weren't offended, by that comment. I didn't really mean it. I just needed to get from A to B, and, that was my way of doing it. And she said, it matters, Mr. Crawford. Cops look to you to see how to act. It matters. Yeah. And I'm like, I love that she didn't just suffer in silence and just think, I need to march in lockstep. Yeah. She didn't get in the way of the investigation, but at the same time, she let him know, it's not cool. For you to treat me like that, because you're going to affect the way other people see me. Yeah. And then I can't do my job. And I loved that.
Well, that's what I love about just the writing here, because that like every little detail gets you to discover a little bit more about this character. Like the fact that she's not afraid to kind of speak up to authority and call them out on things like that. And there's kind of like a vulnerability and like an as well as like an ingenuity to her character that we see in a lot of moments, like when she is going into the storage garage. Yeah. And you could tell it's just like, here I am. She's basically been just like sent off, like just kind of almost given like carte blanche to do whatever she has to do for this little project, because I don't think anyone's like fully taking it seriously that she's going to figure out this case. It's more of like, this was more of like an experiment for Jack Crawford to just be like, okay, well, we'll get her to deal with like Hannibal Lecter, and she's kind of approaching it very seriously and just like, I'm gonna do this. This is part of my job. It's part of my training, my schooling, and all that. Yeah. But she's at this. Like trying to like jimmy open that thing, and she goes into her car. She's got like a jack. She like she figures it out while this like old guy is just like, I don't know what's going on here. And you can tell that she's still like very green, and she's still like worried about herself, and she's kind of like, she says something specifically. She's like, hey, if this closes, here's my card. Here's my card. They know I'm with you. Like, she has to emphasize, like, don't try any, like, she's not saying it, but it's like, don't try anything. My colleagues know that I'm with you, sort of thing. So she's still kind of like weary of like a lot of things that are going on around her. She knows that she doesn't have like the full confidence to do this job, but she's still gonna like approach it. But she's kind of somewhat being transparent about it, or just, she isn't, but it's coming through that, there is some vulnerability there. And that really plays in nicely towards the end of the movie when she is kind of in the belly of the beast and she's there alone. Nobody knows where she is. nobody knows, because she wasn't expecting this situation to happen, and she's kind of in there with Catherine Martin and the yappy dog, and just like, don't leave me, you fucking bitch. And she's just like, Catherine, like, the other officers are on the way, but she's just saying it like with such conviction, but you can also like hear like how terrified it is in her voice. And I think this was like the first time like watching that scene again, like just knowing like, oh shit, she's like full on lying to this girl and almost lying to herself as well, just to kind of like get through this situation. And I think that, and not to like speak to like Hannibal and Julianne Moore at this point, but because we already did kind of mention her, and I feel like it's not the same character. Like, it is the same character, but like we're looking at Julianne Moore playing Clarice Starling 10 years later, after she's had all this experience, after she doesn't hesitate to speak up to authority the same way here, where it's just like, you know, she's a little bit, you know, I don't want to say like nebbish about it, but, you know, clearly she didn't bring it up until Jack Crawford brought it up here, whereas like, you know, the Julianne Moore version of her is going to be more not afraid to kind of challenge those people, and that's like what the difference in that interpretation was. And maybe it's just that we as an audience prefer to see this version of Clarice, just to kind of see her coming into her own and like, you know, evolving to that, rather than a point where she's already kind of like, dare I say, what's the terminology? Is it the Mary Sue?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because I think the reason I find, just in terms of Jodie Foster and her portrayal, and also the way the character is written for this particular iteration of Clarice Starling's tale, ultimately, I feel like the thing that attracts me the most to her is that, like, the fact that she knows the world that she occupies, and that Jonathan Demme, as a director, spends so much time putting us in her point of view. Basically, like, so many times there are men staring down the barrel of the camera, looking at us, either lusting after us, or looking down their nose and belittling us, or even just, it doesn't have to be all that dark, but it can still be like looking at us with an idealistic, like, I'm trying to think about, I can't remember the name of the guy with the crossed eyes who asks her out, and she knows that even he's looking at her, you know, with this like rose-colored kind of like lens, you know, this dreamy-eyed schoolboy kind of like infatuation that he has with her, and all he wants is, you know, like a chance to like take her out. And she's just, but I love that he's one of the few people, there are very few people in this movie who she stares down the barrel of the camera with directness as well. The rest of the time, it seems that she's looking kind of just off camera, almost like if she were to be looking at you, you'd be like, why are you looking at my ear? Like, you know, or why are you looking at the top of my head? Or why are you looking at my chin? You know, you're not really like looking, but she looks at Hannibal Lecter, certainly. She looks at the guy with the crossed eyes who's flirting with her. And then she, it's not even flirtatious, but it's harmless. Just kind of like, are you flirting with me? I don't remember if he's a doctor, but she you know, it's just like, she confronts him, but not in a confrontational way. Just kind of everything out on Front Street. And with Casey Lemons, her friend, who plays, I can't remember her name, they don't use it enough, Ardelia. Yeah. She, when they're figuring it out, like right before the climax and right before she goes off in her, you know, solo investigatory venture, but I find more than anything, when she's kind of like, again, the word of the mission, that kept occurring to me, just thinking about when she's hot on the trail and she's got her eyes on the prize and she's picking things up and putting them together. Those are usually the times, regardless of who she's looking at, that she is staring down the barrel of the camera. Her directness and her focus is on the mission, not so much on the distractions from the mission, like so many of the men in the movie. And I just don't get that, you know, from any other iteration that I've seen. I haven't seen the Paramount Plus series. I don't know how they handle Clarice, but
I don't really remember. Well, I mean, that didn't last, but
right.
Yeah, I mean, well, because they were, you know, really wanted to capture that the male gaze of it all, and there is some inconsistency when you have the Casey Lemon's character there, but it's just like, but when she's doing it, it's not in the same way. It doesn't feel as intrusive as the way that it is with whether it's like Jack Crawford or Hannibal Lecter or any of the cops. Also, what I was gonna say, Casey Lemons was in Candyman, another favorite.
Virginia Madsen, she was her best friend.
She was Bernadette. Yeah, she was just like, she was the best friend character in the early 90s, and then she went on to be a director herself. But there was also one moment that there's two moments that stick out to me of just like that sort of Clarice being this like ogled by men, and the first one is like during the credits when she goes into the elevator and it's like all these like towering men around her, and she's just sort of like do like this is like whatever. And then the other one is when she's at the airport, when she's like flying back from like seeing Hannibal, and it's just this quick shot. She's like walking down the airport corridor, and this guy kind of like comes up from behind her and walks around her, like walks in front of her and just sort of like looks back at her. Yeah. Gives her like an up and down.
Yeah, and that actually happens a few times to her, like when she's running. There's I forget when exactly in the film.
Oh, the cadets.
Where she's jogging with Ardelia, and the cadets are just checking both of them out, and they're both just like, they're not even clocking it because that's not what they're there for. But I love that elevator shot because, again, like if we're talking in terms of just like setting the stage for the movie, like that happens really, really early on. Like all we know at that point is that Jack Crawford wants to see her, and that she's obviously in training, and everyone else is around her seems to be as well. So okay, this is some kind of boot camp or something. And then when she goes into that elevator, because I think nobody walks into this movie completely blind, I feel like everybody, even at the time, had a rough idea what they were watching. Something about the imposing nature of like what waited for her kind of like manifested and even like doubled down on itself, because you see all of these, like you said, these big, strong men, and here she is, this tiny, like minute, like figure. She just looks so small. And I don't oftentimes think in terms of like people and their size and that, gauging like their ability for what they can handle. But I don't know, it's something. So even somebody like me who doesn't buy into that, like the visual is still so incredibly effective in terms of just kind of, that might be the first and last time in the entire movie that I'm worried about her. Honestly, I think the rest of the movie I watch her, again, like walking a tightrope, as it were, like, because I think the next thing that we see is her going into Jack Crawford's office and immediately kind of like taking in all of those that evidentiary photographs and whatnot, on his wall, and she looks, I guess, troubled by it, but she doesn't look, daunted. Like she's leaning in, as opposed to going, oh my goodness, I mean, there is some kind of scholarly fascination that she seems to be walking in with. And I love the fact that she's not perfect. I love the fact that, like, as she's walking in, the first time she meets Hannibal, I just adore the fact that there's this, it's something she loses later, but for the first meeting, there's almost like a cheery kind of like glamour that she puts on, just when he's just kind of like, these drawings are all I have instead of a view, Clarice. She's just like, well, perhaps you could lend us your view on these, on these cases, or whatever. Like, she needs to get him to like sign stuff,
and it's just like and then he starts to like tut her, and it's almost like this like smile on her face just like drops immediately. She's like, oh, I fucked up. I had him and then I lost. And he even says as much. He's just like, oh, you were courteous and polite and. Like all you can do it better than I can, but
well, he starts dressing her down.
There's definitely like because their relationship evolves very much so from the first moment till till the last one. I mean, of course, there was like her first exchange with him when she's walking out, and then the multiple Migs throws his ejaculate into her hair. So it's just like, you know, it kind of toughens her each time that she goes back, and the next time when she's like been out in the rain and he gives her the towel, and then he starts talking to her about like her relationship with Jack Crawford, and he says something just like, you know, do you think that he fantasizes about fucking you?
Yeah.
And she kind of she like thinks about it for a second, then she kind of like scoffs at it, and she's just like, frankly, doctor, like, you know, that's kind of like beneath you. That's something that like that Miggs would say. And he's just like, not anymore.
But even just,
but
like,
he's impressed. Like he's impressed by her, because it's just like, okay, she can like hold her own in this repartee between us.
And again, that's a perfect like example of like kind of the power struggle, because you can feel she knows he's trying to shock her by like making this. I wouldn't even call it like an accusation, but I guess like this
a suggestion.
What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, this misnomer, you know, of just kind of like, yeah, Jack Crawford, think about it. You think he, you know, like it is beneath Lecter. But what she says, she's like, that doesn't interest me, doctor. You know, like, that's not why I'm here, and that's not what I'm about. And when she says, frankly, it's the kind of thing that Miggs would say, and then he says, not anymore, because he knows that she feels maybe, albeit remotely, kind of indirectly responsible for anything that anyone might suffer in that environment, especially because the where all of our minds go, because Hannibal seemed so aghast, which seemed completely out of character for him, but, you know, not in a bad way, not a bad writing way, but just in a, oh wow, something got to him. He was apologizing profusely to her after she had the ejaculate thrown on her, and she ran back to his cell and got so close to the glass, or whatever it is. And I'll just call it glass because I don't know what it's called. But and he apologized and basically just kind of like humbled himself, because yeah, I want to fuck with your mind, but like that's just rude, you know, like that's not that's not the way. I don't want to see somebody like you have to go through anything like that. No one should have to suffer that. That's just horrible. So just know, like, you know, here's a little, you know, tidbit that I'm going to give you. But when she hears that, you know, Miggs is dead, and she knows that Hannibal was basically the catalyst for it, her response to Jack Crawford, it's Jack Crawford who tells her no, and she says, I don't know how to feel about it, you know, and he's just like, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. But what I really, really love is he says not anymore, and it kind of takes, you know, like it's something Miggs would say, and he says not anymore, and it like takes the wind out of her sails. Again, like, here I was not quite chastising you for working so blue, and now you're reminding me that a man is dead, and even though I'm not responsible, you know, I feel a remote responsibility, and you're going to exploit that. All of that, but at the same time, there's a show of strength, because I love that, like, when she leaves Hannibal the first time and she's moving toward the car and she has the flashback about her father and she cries, you know, in the parking lot. I love that, watching that. I'm not worried about her. I'm just kind of like, yeah, just get it out. You've had Hannibal Lecter in your head. You need a good cry, and you're smart enough to just get it out so you can get back. And what is the next shot we see her? She is firing rounds into, you know, like a range. And then she's also acting a little rashly. She's going into that simulated situation where she didn't check her door, and now, you know, she's quote unquote dead. Yeah. So, but then
I also saw that scene as kind of like a way that, like, it was almost like, just because she is the woman in the situation, is just like everyone else is kind of like, oh, good job, and it's just like, do you know why you're dead? Because it's almost like they don't like her presence. Like, she just upsets the status quo for being this like young up and coming FBI agent who's it's almost like Jack Crawford has given her this assignment and people are jealous of her in a way. Like, it's not really played with a lot, but you can kind of see it with like some of these peripheral FBI characters throughout the movie.
Right. That actually, I didn't think about it that way. I just thought it was straight up sexism. Like, it's probably both. Yeah. But the fact that, like, he's congratulating her male counterpart. I mean, and granted, it didn't look like he
that
did
guy,
anything wrong.
Yeah,
but
he didn't check his,
but he
his
didn't,
corners.
Yeah, he didn't check it. Actually, he didn't check his corner either. Thank you. Okay, so there you go. Straight up sexism too. But any excuse to like get a dig in there and commend the male in the room and just kind of like, I don't know about tear down, but certainly discipline publicly, you know, like the female in the room. So I also, there was one thing that always makes me think about you now that I wanted to bring up.
Okay.
And it's what I refer to now as the cat conundrum. If we want to discuss Catherine Martin and her abduction a little bit.
Okay.
Because off pod in the past, you've always kind of like called attention to the fact that like, here's her little cat in the window mewing because it's hungry. And she's like, I think she even says as much. She's kind of like, are you hungry? You want dinner? Okay. And she's on her way to go feed her cat. You know, she's been away all day and everything. And then she sees Buffalo Bill. She helps him out. She gets pushed. You better say 14. And gets punched out and pushed into, the van and, all of that. And he drives away. And I tried to gauge, because you always worried about that cat. You always felt, if I'm not mistaken, that cat is dead. The poor cat. And that cat is dead. By the time they realize she's missing and start the search party, what becomes of that cat? And I did a little research. Okay. I went to dodo.com.
Okay.
And it looks like cats can survive up to 2 weeks if they have access to water, but without food. So if she leaves the seat up or, just has like a very large bowl or whatever, or even some dishes that are soaking, like that cat could conceivably last, but
cats are very industrious. They can go up to a sink and turn on the tap if they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. But
I don't know. Did we discuss this before off pod? I know that we might have said something in Friday the 13th part 2 when Alice's cat, if that even is her cat or just like a stray that kind of wanders in
right
once in a while.
Yeah.
It's just like
her cute. But with her vocal fry.
Yeah.
But
I'm more concerned about, well, I mean, he's dead at this point, but I was going to say Max in Halloween 5 when what's her fuck is just like, chill out, Max. I'll get you water in a minute, and then never does.
Right. Tina. Yeah, Tina's horrible. She's the worst. We'll get to her when we do that.
Okay.
But apparently cats can only survive 3 to 4 days without water and without food. But after about 2 days without food, they already begin to become malnourished. So because she was missing, she was reported missing. We found that out when we meet the senator and all of that. Or at least I think it was in the news report that she had been reported missing. And you have to be gone 48 hours in order to be reported missing. So someone must have missed her and known to report her. But the cat, I think, though, probably in a malnourished state, somebody must have gotten to the cat and fed her. So I don't know if it's her or him, fed the cat. So just wanted to put
I love that we're talking about this right now because I don't remember anything. It's just like I care about a fictional cat in a movie that wasn't. I might have just said like flippantly, so just like, oh, that poor cat's not gonna get fed now.
Yeah, right.
Just to make fun of the not that, like, forget the fact that she was abducted and is gonna be held in a well for who knows how long. That cat.
Oh, we know she gets
did
out.
Not get
she
fed.
Gets out. And she has a dog at the end. She has Precious. She doesn't want to let Precious go, which I commend her because you've both been through a trying time. My cat Des was previously owned by an ex. I don't even know, but someone I went through some trauma with for about 4 years, and now she's kind of like this little, we both survived.
You're trauma bonded, yeah.
We're trauma bonded, just like Catherine Martin and Precious.
Okay.
So there you go.
Yeah. No, I well, thank you for bringing up the the cat being fed of it all. I appreciate it.
Yes. But there was something else I wanted to talk about. It was just something about Chilton. And I've seen like a few iterations of him. I think he was played by the same actor in Red Dragon, the film that they made after this, the prequel.
Well, yeah. Anthony Heald.
Yeah.
is the actor. Yeah, he plays him in Red Dragon. But in because he's canonically, I guess he's killed at the after the end of the movie, because that's the old friend that he's having for dinner. Right. And he just because it's never addressed in Hannibal the movie, but in the book Hannibal, it speaks to the disappearance of Frederick Chilton back 10 years prior to that.
Right. I just love how kind of, for anyone who follows the lore, Chilton, there's a lot of opportunities you can take. I felt like with the Hannibal series, Raul Esparza played him in that particular iteration. And because I walked in pre-hating him and thinking he was just kind of this odious, reckless,
the odious Mr. Shrek.
Yes, exactly. In the resoundingly negative.
What does Hannibal call? What does he call him? What adjective does he use?
Oh, I can't remember.
Oh. Is it loathsome or something?
It's something along those lines, and it fits.
Yeah.
That's another thing this movie does. Again, here we were discussing the cat when the girl gets thrown in the van. I feel so much more sympathy for Hannibal Lecter than I do for Dr. Frederick Chilton. Yeah. Just because if you asked me who would you rather spend a weekend with, I'd be like, well, Hannibal, hands down. He might eat me or hurt me or even just psychologically manipulate me. But I'd rather do that than be turned off.
I think Hannibal's thing is just he kills and eats the rude, or at least eats the rude. And obviously he's killed people in for self-preservation or just
of course
trying to escape. But it's just for the most part, it seems that what we've seen in flashbacks and stuff, that he kills people who suck, or he attacks people like the Mason Verger, and the flutist in the orchestra who just cannot play the instrument right, because it's almost like he considers that rude to how dare you be part of this prestigious lineup of talented musicians and not know your part, to make this unpleasant for me. So it's like he's a very...
It makes me relate to him a little bit more, actually, because I'm well, if you were a psychopath, or a sociopath, and you didn't really have any kind of empathy or anything that would, it's not your fault. So, if I'm irritated and I have no inhibitions about how I manipulate somebody or how I, deal with their mortality, take it in my hands and, decide whether they live or die, then of course, if I'm leaning in the direction of people who are making the world worse, aren't I kind of a superhero? Kind of, at least an anti-hero.
Do you think that Hannibal is Virgo?
That I don't know, because that's tough. I don't know. Does the Zodiac really enter into it when you're a sociopath? I don't know.
Well, according to I guess the props and documents and stuff, his birthday is January 20th. So happy belated birthday. 1930. I forget what it was. It was in the 30s. So he, I guess, would be
an Aquarius
or a Capricorn on the cusp of Aquarius.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
See, I celebrate so many Capricorn, Aquarius cusp birthdays. I literally have spent the past month just birthday, and I still have more ahead. So I get along with Capricorn Aquarians. So it stands to reason that he's a cusper. Yeah. I would get along with Hannibal Lecter, I think. I don't know if he'd like me, but
who knows? But we never know. But when someone canonically has a birthday in any of these movies, I take that with a grain of salt of whether that is their true zodiac sign, because sometimes it's just oh, that person is so not a a Leo, for example. So I don't know. The only reason I question it is because you had some I guess relatability to Hannibal when you were discussing that, and also the if you ever watch those Benny drama, or like the comedian, he does like all those like skits on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and he did one that was like the signs like in a horror movie or whatever for Halloween, and it was just like all these horror characters as the different signs, and the designated Virgo one was, I think, supposed to be Hannibal Lecter. And he was just, the whole time he was just there like cleaning up after people and judging them for making a mess at the party.
I mean, he is meticulous.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the man makes a mess when it's necessary, which is very Virgo, because I will fully endorse a necessary mess, but but clean the fuck up after yourself if you have the time and the inclination, or even if you don't have the inclination, get it. Like, I mean, yeah, that maybe, but I mean, would you assign Virgo to Hannibal Lecter? What would you?
I don't know. I'd have to think. I'd have to think about that. I didn't really give it much thought. It just
popped
into my mind.
Okay.
I don't get it. I mean, no, because it'll take too much time out of this podcast if we start talking about the
We'll revisit it in Hannibal when we cover that.
Sure. I mean, but that might be a completely different characterization of him.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's not very even the way we revisit the character. I mean, I think he's pretty much the same character in Red Dragon as he is in this film, and I still have yet to see Manhunter.
There's more,
which is the first Red Dragon.
Yeah, I think there's more consistency with him from Silence to Red Dragon than there is from Silence to Hannibal. But I mean, again, Hannibal is also 10 years removed, and it's supposed to be, this is like he's been on the loose for all this time. So I mean, and he's been living under a different alias and all this. So it's just like there's so many different faces of Hannibal Lecter. The Manhunter, Hannibal is played by Brian Cox, who, I mean, a phenomenal actor. But I don't think that, like, because it's a very small role in the movie, and I just don't think that, like, when they made it, that, they probably weren't thinking. I don't even know if Silence of the Lambs had been written at that point, because that came out in '86. Right. But I don't think it was ever kind of, Hannibal was not like this big flashy role in the movie. It was just like, he was this guy. Like, it was all about Will Graham and Francis Dollarhide, who is the serial killer that they're after in that story. And what's interesting, because it's been a while since I've seen Manhunter, and I don't know if I prefer it over Red Dragon, because it's also been a while since I've watched Red Dragon all the way through. All I remember is that it just feels like a very like straightforward, like there's nothing, it's just like a Hollywood prequel kind of thing, and they definitely do a better job of like emulating like appearances of certain things, like, because they recreate the prison block and all of that. Sure. And the characters,
Barney is still there,
but it feels Barney is like in all of it, but Barney's even in that actor, Frankie Faison, is also in Manhunter. I think he plays the one of the orderlies, but I don't think he's like named Barney in that. So it's just interesting that he's kind of this one face that keeps popping up. But for all intents and purposes, that's Red Dragon is a remake of Manhunter. But the thing that I remember with Red Dragon is that it's a more faithful adaptation to the novel Red Dragon, whereas Manhunter is very much evocative of the time that it was made. It has a very Miami Vice feel to it.
Yeah. Right.
And Hannibal is something complete, like it's entirely different in itself. And what's interesting about this franchise is that none of these movies really feel connected, just in terms of like the tone that they bring forward. And I think that out of all of them, Silence of the Lambs has the most unique one, because like we mentioned Twin Peaks earlier, and it almost feels like this could be like belong in the world of Twin Peaks, or just sort of like a very similar world like that. But I don't get that from Manhunter. Like there's no consistency from this world to Hannibal. Like it's a completely different thing. Red Dragon, and I couldn't even speak to Hannibal Rising at this point. Even like the series, it's just it's so different that it's almost like we've talked about the original Halloween. Like we haven't done a podcast on that, but I've always said that there's something very otherworldly about that movie because we're set in the Midwest. But it's very much like, you know, there's palm trees everywhere. Like it doesn't feel like it. So it just like it's a movie that exists at a time and a place that just like has never happened or just doesn't exist. And it gives it this quality that's just very special. And I feel the same way about the world that Silence of the Lambs inhabits, like that all these characters inhabit. Like it's a very special place that's just like I've never seen in anything else cinematically, especially like things that have come out at this time, other than maybe Twin Peaks. But that's Twin Peaks is its very own thing as well.
I never thought of that correlation before. I think that's really interesting because I agree. Even time-wise, I mean, it's not that wide a birth of years, but the book was written in the 80s, I believe, and then the movie's released in 91. And there's just this kind of timeless quality to it. I mean, not exactly. I mean, certainly there's, like technology is where it's at or whatever. Televisions look a particular way, but I mean... I don't know why. It's because I'm gay. There's so much of it that leans on like Clarice's fashion and her hairdo. I don't really assign a period to it. You could tell me it's 1982 and I would believe you, but you could also tell me it's 1991 and I'd be like, oh, because she's supposed to be a rube who's trying not to look like one, so maybe she thinks that's high fashion. Sure, whatever. Yeah, I'll take it. So that's like like almost 10 years. It's almost a decade's worth of difference, and there's a lot of fashion trends that change like from there. I mean, if you look at the way teenagers dressed in 1982 versus like 1991, there's going to be a huge difference. But this movie, I love the way it dodges a lot of tropes that I think in the hands of another filmmaker and another creative team, even this film could have gone like wrong so many ways. For the first time ever, while I was watching the sequence where Clarice discloses the story of the lambs to Hannibal, with the quid pro quo of it all, I realized I can hear the lambs screaming when she tells that story, but it's completely an invention of the script, the performance, and the way it's shot. And because Clarice can hear it, I can hear it. I've already been put in her point of view so thoroughly and so effectively that I don't need any more than just like the monologue, essentially. Like it's very theatrical in that way. Like I am imagining, I'm being let in to collaborate with these artists who have set up this world, and I get to finish not even the image. I mean, I can if I imagine what it looks like as she's telling the story, but also just the sound. And I thought a lesser director, I think so many would have fallen into a pitfall of creating a lamb screaming soundtrack, either in the opening sequence or her to be haunted by like nightmares and wake up like with a gasp or something, hearing the lamb screaming. And for me, that would have been so exploitative and so cheap. And I really I don't know, again, it takes a finesse and restraint as a director to employ that kind of
again, it really speaks to Jodie Foster's performance. But you're making me think of I believe it was the Urban Legend podcast when Alicia Witt is talking about how her and her friend who was decapitated in the opening scene were on like the pep squad or whatever, and then there was just like sounds of like cheerleader sounds as she was telling the story.
Oh, and I that's totally on par with, with what Jodie Foster did. No, it's not. I have a lot of problems with that movie, and that's one of them. But I also just, there were other things that, I mean, I love that Anthony Hopkins, as far as like his attention to the portrayal, we've already touched on a few aspects, but one thing that I love, so much of the character isn't even, maybe that's why he feels so kind of like possessed by the movie. I don't know, or so, like he occupies so much more space than he actually does as far as screen time in this movie, because so much of what we learn about him is what people say about him when he's not around. Like even before we ever see him in that cell, it is so incredibly set up, this walk, you know, down like cell by cell by cell, in anticipation of what is this man going to look like, how is he going to manifest, and we already have an idea. So for him to be just kind of like standing there sprightly, you know, like a golden Oscar, just waiting for her. I've seen Anthony Hopkins speak to it in interviews, saying that Jonathan Demme asked him, like, how do you want to start off like in this scene? And he said, I want to be standing right in the center of the cell, waiting for her. And he's like, why do you want to do that? And he said, because I can smell her coming. And he started already like going into the Lecter voice and everything. And I carry that with me every time I watch it too. You know, me, king of headcanon. So I'm watching him and I'm just thinking like, God, he's smelling her. And he is. Again, it's backed up by the text.
Yeah.
Later,
and it's so much more effective than his introduction in Red Dragon. Well, not his introduction, because he is in the opening scene of Red Dragon, but when we're first introduced to him in the prison cell, and he's just kind of laying down on the bed, and Edward Norton walks in, and he's just like, that's the same atrocious aftershave you wore in court. But he also doesn't have like the same reverence for Will Graham that he does for Clarice. But it's still like it just kind of like
a woman, coming down the walkway this time. But I mean, even that, I like the diversion of the expectation, because everybody who's watching Red Dragon has most likely seen Silence of the Lambs, has that image like kind of like burned into their memory. So when they see him just laying there, they're like, oh, I guess he doesn't care as much about this one. That's funny.
Yeah.
But I also just love, like, one of my favorite things that's shared about him, and it's not even about like his past or anything like that. It's speculating about like what he might do, is from Clarice after he breaks free, and we see Casey Lemons just like charging down that hallway to get to Clarice in time to let her know he's on the loose, you know, like in the way we're all thinking.
That was was really dramatic, because she doesn't even hang up doesn't take the time to hang up the phone, races down the hall. It's just like, okay, like this is big, but it's not like let's abandon everything else. It's just like, oh,
it's a
shit.
movie.
It's
a movie.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna hang up the phone. I'm gonna walk down the hall and be like, "Yo, Clarice, are you sitting down? I gotta tell you something."
Nah,
she just like bursts in through the door like Hannibal escapes.
Yes, I feel it. I feel it every time.
And she's wearing a robe, like Clarice is wearing. So she was probably like in the shower. She like burst through it. And I don't even like. So do they live in a dorm, or like do they live?
Well, with my own time in the military, I can certainly tell you, I don't know, or in the FBI, like, sure, probably. I mean, there's probably some kind of like, I don't know, dormitory, like situation, you know, like, I mean, they gotta put them up the way they would in any other kind of like recruitment situation. So I assume it's like summer camp, probably. Okay. Maybe there's even bunks. I don't know. Yeah. But what I love is when she's like saying like, you know, he won't come after me. No, and she's just like, oh, come on, and she's like, no, he won't. How do I explain this? It would seem rude, you know, like I'm paraphrasing, but just
you would consider that
I
to be
love
rude.
the fact, and I love the fact that she says it, I buy it, I believe it, and it makes me so happy because she's absolutely right. And again, it's a speculation about this character, but that just proves how well we know him and how well we know her at this particular juncture. That I wouldn't want to live in a world thinking like, oh no, he's going to go after Clarice. Like, no, he won't. Yeah. No, he didn't have any beef with her. He's fascinated with her. And he even says when he says the world's more interesting, you know, with her in it, like, I'm like, yeah, Yeah,
and
I get it.
that's a complaint of the sequel, because there's actually the line where,
Oh,
where
God.
Barney asks her, it's just like, do you ever think he'll come after you? And she says, oh, just about every other second of every day.
We'll address that. We'll discuss that. But I do have to say also, just in light of, because I know there's a controversy that followed this film in its release, and that continues to, I think, be addressed anytime people speak at length about it. And it's the confusion what I perceive to be confusion around the depiction of Buffalo Bill. A lot of people perceived from Ted Levine's portrayal that he was, somewhere in some kind of queer, what's the word I'm looking for? Just dysmorphic, like magic eye poster. Like, basically, you kind of see whatever you want to. If you let your eyes relax a little bit, you might see what's actually there, or do some research. But a lot of people perceived him to be portrayed as a gay man, and that bothered a lot of people. And I saw Ted Levine in interviews address this, and Jonathan Demme, frankly, both addressing this with full apology to the gay community. And it really broke my heart to see Ted Levine apologizing. He said, I just think my characterization, maybe something in my performance just wasn't specific enough, or that there was something that I should have done that I couldn't have done, or should have done that I didn't do. And if anyone feels oppressed by my performance or insulted by it, then I wholly apologize.
I think it's a testament to his performance that it is so off-putting in that way, that it did offend so many people, because that's just, like, you don't turn heads and get that kind of critical feedback for not performing the role properly. So as far as I'm concerned, he did everything right.
It is interesting, though, because this particular screening, I was most affected by the Goodbye Horses, sequence where he does the tableau and everything like that, nude, and the one that I think seemed to be the most off-putting to people for his character. Yeah. When he does some pretty... we're shown, some evidence of some pretty brutal things he does, but I think that's the one that stuck most in people's minds. And for that reason, in this particular screening, it actually stood out to me as the most unnecessary part of the movie. Like you mentioned earlier, like the perfection of this film, and I've believed that for a really, really long time. For the first time ever, and this is with 2024 eyes, I realize that, but for the first time ever, I was watching that sequence and kind of feeling like, I don't know if this is absolutely necessary. It feels the most sensationalized of any of the other moments, because once we get back to the case, back to Clarice, pursuing him and everything like that, that all feels like the movie we've been watching. And because even this movie at its most gory, we're always kind of going back to the humanity of it. And I feel like it's like I said, the most exploitative. It feels like it's not so much about humanity as it is about like something shocking. And that's not an accusation at Jonathan Demme or Ted Levine. It's just something that for the first time, I feel like I saw what they were apologizing for. And not agreed that they should, but felt like, I understand. I don't think that particular section of the movie is going to age particularly well. That said, does it ruin the movie? Absolutely not. There are so many other cylinders firing so exquisitely with this piece that it's just kind of a shame that like it's even an issue, that the fact that I'm even bringing it up, but I don't want anybody to listen to this and think like, well, they didn't talk about Buffalo Bill, going, well, you didn't talk about my tableau, but
I was getting a little share with that one.
Yeah, they didn't talk about my tableau, but I'm everybody tonight. But no, it's just like I don't. It's not an insult to the film, and it's barely a criticism. It's just something that kind of like struck me. It struck a different chord with me now than it ever has before. I don't think it justifies an attack.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna push back. I mean, I will agree that it is possibly like somewhat sensationalized, because that is a moment of the film where that is very much like exists now in like the zeitgeist of pop culture, where, you know, I would mention Family Guy of like Seth Green and all. They even like did a thing in another episode where Chris like did that performance where he tucked his penis in between his legs and was like dancing in front of the camera. So it's like, you know, it's been parodied, it's been talked about.
Yes.
I don't think that it takes away from the film at all. I think, and like I said, I think that it enhances just that character and how unsettling he is, because this whole sequence is kind of riddled with these like close-up shots of just like very disturbing imagery. Like he's got this like his tattoo, the piercing in his nipple, the lips, and just like the "I'd fuck me," and just like all that, like it's just putting you right there. It's like, this is a movie that makes you feel uncomfortable, and it has no apologies for that. And I think that, you know, I don't feel like I've been taken out of the movie at that point, because this Silence of the Lambs is very much a soap opera, in that there are multiple storylines going on at the same time. Like I said, like we leave Clarice and the investigation for such a long time to go through this whole set piece of Hannibal's escape. So, you know, it feels right that we're checking in and we're spending time with these other characters and seeing kind of like the full scope of the story, and not just one aspect of it, but still feel like everyone's giving everything that they need to. And I mean, that song as well, by what is it? Who sings it?
Q Lazarus.
And I don't know what else they've done, but it's just like that song is now synonymous with just like very like creepy, disturbing imagery. And it's such a beautiful song, but it's hard to like not listen to it and just like think of that moment in the film. And I've heard it used in like other things before as well. And it's just like it's always something that's just like weird or creepy, or like as like an allusion to Silence of the Lambs. But like a
shorthand to creepiness.
But I kind of I love it for that. So I don't feel that it's unnecessary. I still think that this is a 5-star movie all around. So I wanted to ask, does that mean that this is not 5 stars for you?
No, I think it's still 5 stars, because this is the thing. Like I said, I don't think I don't find it so distracting that it pulls me out of the movie entirely. This is just the first time my sweater caught on the door as I was passing through this movie. You know what I mean? It was the first time I actually kind of felt like, tonally, I don't require this. The fact that it's there is fine. But and also just, I mean, I can see if someone finds it problematic for like the kind of arm's length thing it is, and the othering it is for anyone kind of indulging in any kind of like sexual identity question. Then I'll say I see your point, but at the same time, the movie itself, and this is never part of the discussion. The movie itself, the script itself, addresses the identity of Buffalo Bill and what it is that he's actually trying to achieve. Clarice even goes so far to address a word that I rarely hear used at all now, which is transsexualism. But she says essentially trans people, as we would say it today, are very passive, and that, you know, that we can't correlate these violent, murderous acts with transsexualism, basically, is what she's saying.
Well,
but it's one line of many in a very interesting exchange between the two of them, and I think it falls by the wayside for a lot of viewers.
Okay, well, you're making me think of when we talked about Psycho, because there was like the whole debate. We didn't have the debate, but you like spoke of the debate before of just like, is Norman Bates gay? And you definitively said no, he isn't, because if he is, then he would be murdering men and not women. And that there was sort of like him kind of taking on this persona of mother was this psychological thing. And there's like, you know, when he was running up the stairs and does that little like hip swivel, that was not like a a gay thing, but it was more just him
Right.
kind of like going into the role of
Mother.
mother. And when you're like examining Buffalo Bill as a serial killer, he's like they're very specific, like to say like this is not like none of the victims were sexualized or just like or anything was done to them
Yes.
in that regard. And that's kind of like how like the discovery that Clarice makes when she's just like, what does he want with them? And it's just like he covets them.
Yes.
And then that sort of goes into the discovery that he's using them to make the skin suits and all that.
Right.
Fun,
That the killing
all
is even
that.
incidental.
The killing
Yeah.
is incidental. So in a way, it's not so much like when I look at the character, it's like it has nothing to do with like the sexuality or the like anything that you can, any label or letter that you can apply to it. It's just that he covets and he covets these like skin costumes, and in that regard it is incidental, you know, who the victims are or what his sexual identity is, because like other than really the backstory or just the information that like Hannibal tells Clarice, or just like, you know, who he was, and just like, you know, in this relationship with a former patient of his, and et cetera, like none of that was correlated to the violence or anything like that. So I think that, you know, looking at the picture through that entire scope, I think that they did handle things very responsibly. I don't think that there's anything here to suggest anything otherwise. And I think that, that was so long ago, like 33 years now, that, you know, people like of the community would take offense to that. So I'm not sure. And especially when they did so much work to like to be specific about these lines, and even the one that you mentioned that Clarice said. So I mean, I don't have any issue with anything, just as only being a gay man. I don't find it, I don't take any offense to it. I can't speak to.
Well, I remember the note it struck with me when I heard about the backlash, because I was 11 when this movie came out. And I don't remember what age I was when I first saw it, but I do know that what it felt, even to my little closeted, you know, boy heart, it felt not so much even retaliatory as preemptive. Like, not weird. It didn't seem like they were like the community was taking issue so much with the way they were being depicted. It was more the way and I think we thought about things in this terms a lot in the 90s. The way straight people, by and large, might receive what they're getting, and was it communicated effectively enough to draw a line? And because so many audience members were just kind of like seeing these what's the word I'm looking for, like depraved acts and everything like that, and it all seemed to fall under one umbrella, like, whoa, well, that makes sense. You know, that he would be behaving that way. Look how he stands in front of the mirror and tucks himself, you know, like that kind of thing. And I can understand a worry about that, but I think worrying so much about how straight people see you, I feel like maybe we've made some progress from there, you know, and actually spoken to our own community, like made our own content.
Did you read the book?
No.
Okay, because I'm just trying to wonder, like, how, like, is that particular scene in the book, because then this is I don't know why this is being kind of lumped onto Ted Levine and Jonathan Demme in that case, because this is a Thomas Harris thing. And if you look at it in that regard, and you look at the first book in the series, which is Red Dragon, where you have a serial killer who is a straight man, and he is sexually defiling women in that story. So it's just like if you compare that to this character, it's just like it's completely different things. So I think just people just didn't do enough research. I think that they just kind of
I agree.
Like with most things, I think people just get offended easily and just decide and declare like, oh, this is wrong. And the thing is, all those people that probably criticize Silence back in the day, you don't hear them talking about it anymore, because they probably were just like, oh yeah, we were stupid to get all worked up about that.
Well, we were so focused on the way we were being perceived by heterosexual people who did
Yeah.
from a perception that we had then, did seem to be like largely the minority. I think, particularly with this upcoming generation that we have now, things have never been more fluid and, you know, more kind of like accepted, even without a label. It doesn't need, you know, it doesn't require like, well, are you a this or a that? You know, like I think a lot of people are comfortable embracing the ambiguity.
Yeah.
And maybe for that reason, this particular sequence won't become more problematic, but I hope it never stops being a topic of discussion, because I think it's worth investigating. And just to put a kind of like nice, neat little bow on the topic, it makes me smile from the point of view of Jonathan Demme and Ted Levine, respectively, because I know Jonathan Demme felt so overcome with remorse for any harm he might have done that he made it a point to direct Philadelphia after this movie. Which has its own issues that we could unpack if we ever, you know, were to discuss that movie, but it's not a horror movie, so we probably won't. You know, there was an effort on his part to try and create bridges and give dimension where he felt he failed before. So I'm applauding him for that. And from Ted Levine, probably the most endearing thing, I adore that actor. For those who don't know, but who are familiar with the movie Joyride, he was the voice of the truck driver who kept showing Candy Cane.
Gosh, he was. He was.
Yeah,
he
is amazing.
We need to cover that movie at some point. That's another like early 2000s lost.
Any day.
Lost,
I love that movie.
It's been too long since I've seen it, so I can't speak to that right now.
Okay.
But no, I would be
enough
interested
about it. Yeah.
I would...
Okay, so but Ted Levine said candidly when he was asked to like just, you know, kind of like tuck and expose himself that way, he said, he was asked if he had any reservations about it. He said, absolutely not. I mean, every guy has, you know, curiosity when he's like out of the shower and hasn't put his clothes on yet. It's just a little curiosity, like, well, what would I look like if I were a girl? So everyone's done it. And I'm just like, oh my God, I love you. I just adore you for normalizing it and speaking as it's nothing. There is nothing depraved about it. It's a perfectly natural impulse. Good for you. I adore that man for so many reasons, but that's one big one.
Winding down here, I guess.
Yeah.
I would be remiss to not. I guess we can kind of mention just like all of like the little performances in this movie, just like this, like the small characters that come in and out. And I think that my favorite is we've talked about this before because we actually covered this on the old podcast. I think the character's name is Stacy, and she is the girl who, I guess she works in the bank, is what she says, but she's like, they're in some like soda shop or whatever, and this is right before Clarice goes to Buffalo Bill's house, and she was the best friend of Frederica Bimmel, and they're just like having this conversation, and she's another one of those characters that is like doing the gazy thing where she's looking right at the camera, and Clarice is like looking at her ear or whatever. But and just like how like there's so many characters that just like infuse so much like humanity into them and like this little bit. But the thing that like I remember her for the most is that she kind of has like the Gale Weathers Scream 3 bangs.
Oh my God. Oh, I just she, the whole thing is a look that I would argue probably works better than Gale Weathers' ensemble in that her visage in Scream 3. Yeah. I mean, it's iconic, so you know, absolutely. I can't tear it down, but it works with like the scrunchie and the denim and the, you know, whatever else she has going on, that still kind of like late 80s Midwest fashion going on. I adore it. Was it Acid Wash? I swear it was Acid Wash somewhere.
Probably.
But yeah, she's great. I mean,
no, I like that character.
Again, like absolutely. Like the way, like moving through, because I got to be honest, like I was kind of dragging my feet about screening it again, and it's not because of anything to do with not adoring the film, but I always, in recent years, anytime I find something that I love, or even if I rediscover it, like, oh, I remember this thing that I love, I try not to overwatch it because I don't want the magic to go away. I don't want to get used to it. You know what I mean? And I have seen this film many times, so much so that I'm familiar with the course of the film, and rarely does a moment jump out and surprised me. Even though a few like minute things jumped out here and there. I've already covered a few of them, but I still get little, like when I watch certain things. And one thing that if I noticed it before, I didn't remember it, and it was almost on the periphery, but it seemed to be almost because this movie often gets lumped into kind of like the holy trilogy of Ed Gein nods cinematically with Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and this film. And I felt like one little, or two actually, I guess, little Easter eggs that were almost a nod to Ed Gein were a quilt that we see in Buffalo Bill's, underworld that's on like the bed. We see it twice. We see it once when he's down there and I think he's hearing
he gets
the ringing
the gun,
of his doorbell, and he gets the gun. And then we see it again when Clarice is down there and she's just covering, like every room.
Well, I think we see it through the night vision when he's following her.
Okay.
Yeah.
But during that whole clearing room sequence, like we certainly, it's again, it's not front and center, but it's on the periphery. You can see it, and it looks like a quilt with swastikas on it. And then as she's making her way to, the penultimate climax of that sequence, there's a sheet of paper, like a little banner on the wall as she's just kind of like reading the room. And it said, "America, open your eyes." And I think it had, if not one, like a couple swastikas on it. And while I was looking at that, I thought, like, I don't feel like there's any intimation that Buffalo Bill is like a Nazi sympathizer or anything like that. What I went to was, in my knowledge of Ed Gein, he was fascinated, because, 1950s was when he was prolific in his secrecy. And he was fascinated by the aftermath of World War II and by the tales of what Nazis did with the bodies of the people that they killed, and the way they made skin lamps and the way they made furniture out of, the remains of these people, and was motivated to do that. That's why he ended up drilling like the skulls in half and making bowls out of the tops of the skulls of the bodies that he dug up and everything like that. And that was the only thing that I could really attribute to it, because there didn't seem to be anything else. So it almost felt in an odd way like Jonathan Demme chucking me under the chin for knowing Ed Gein so well. I don't know. Did you have any particular?
No, I don't know. Like I think it was just more texture to add to the like creepiness of this character, because we don't really know a lot about. We don't get very much with him. Like everything we see is sort of like just like aesthetic. And we get like some backstory, like we hear about the past relationship and how Hannibal knows him, but when you compare that to a character like the one that I mentioned, like the Francis Dolarhyde from the Manhunter Red Dragon, where I feel like they go so much deeper into the psyche of that character and like his past. And again, like this might be something that's like in the book Silence of the Lambs, where we do get more of James Gum.
Yes.
What a
name. Yeah. What a name.
Why not James? Like, just, can I buy an S? Well, I guess you can't buy an S, but just S.
He didn't want to be confused with the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, James Gunn.
Yeah. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about it symbolically beyond that. I was actually more curious. Who's the body in the bathtub? Was that the old lady whose house that was?
Oh my God, I never thought of that before.
Yeah.
You're blowing my mind. I'm scared. See, you got me into like the I don't know, the crippling fear of just like being in that environment, like, the dark workshop, and like that. I have many hells, but that's one of them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be surrounded by someone else's handiwork like that.
That house is now an Airbnb.
Oh dear God! Why did they do that? The Texas Chainsaw House is an Airbnb too. Yeah. Why do they do that?
and Scream, this Schumacher.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, you could go and stay there, and I don't know because I believe that the basement is a set. That was made somewhere else. So there is no basement.
There's no well.
There's no well. There's none of that. But like, you know, like, cause we don't really see the upstairs parts of the house. So there's like all this stuff that's in there and it's themed after the movie. So, you know, if anyone wants to stay there, I don't know how anyone would want to stay there or live there because it's right in front of a train track, you know?
That actually doesn't bother me so much. I find trains kind of soothing, like a white noise. But I do have to say, I'd have breakfast there. I would not bed at the bed and breakfast. I will not retire there because I will not be able to lose my anxiety, even though it's just a film.
Would you?
Same thing with Texas Chainsaw.
You wouldn't stay at
I'll eat there.
You wouldn't stay at the TCM.
I would not stay there. I would dine there.
What about?
And I would probably order some meat. Ironically.
What about the Scream House?
I dine there. I don't want to stay because I'm too preemptive in my fear. Like, I am so worried about what might attract someone who is sick, and like, wouldn't it be fun to kill someone in one of those places? And someone would knock on my door and like, you know, I don't trust people at all. Like, I'm too scared. I'm gonna be there the weekend that someone decides to fuck up their life, and it's just gonna ruin my weekend. You know, I don't need that. What about you? Would you stay at them?
Absolutely. All of course them. You would.
Yeah. No, I'll shop there.
Fair enough.
I'll get a selfie, you know, something like that, something special. But then I'll leave.
Nice.
I'll go home.
Okay, cool.
Feed my cat.
Well, I think we've drained this well. So let's move on to let's move on to the cherry picker.
It's not like we killed people on purpose.
First order of business, we need a cherry on top. And actually, I was kind of thinking about this before we started to record, and I mean, can it just be both of them?
Cherries on top?
We've never really done a duo, but it's so... You can't have one without the other. You know, it's so hard to...
If we ship them, like, you know, create like a melding of their names into like either Clanable or Harris, like, then maybe, yeah.
Oh God,
I like Clanable. What do you think?
Clanable is much better than
than Harris.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Sure. Yeah. It's both of them.
Yeah.
We don't really have. We've never had strict rules about the cherry on top. Remember, we gave it to Buddy the dog in Single White Female because we're just like, all these people suck.
Oh. And Howard Shore did the score for Single White Female also.
Oh, so, wow. What a coinky dink. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Last week, we asked you who deserves to die the most. Well, actually, 2 weeks ago. Who deserves to die the most in session 9? I nominated Craig. You nominated Phil. They had no last names. Not a big turnout for this, but because it's not a well-known movie, but across Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube, the final tally was 137 for Craig versus 292 for Phil.
Thanks, guys.
I feel like most people didn't see this movie and they just saw the images of Craig and Phil and just saw like the picture of David Caruso like with his finger like fuck you.
Yeah.
And they're just like that.
And they're
guy.
like, he looks like a prick. Well,
That
what
guy.
did they say?
Mondo Trash CA. I have never seen the movie before, but since Phil is pointing to Craig in the photos you posted, I vote Craig. Oh. So okay, so we're basing it off of the pictures, but that actually worked out in my favor.
Yeah.
The Day Daily. Listening to the recording in session 9 still makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up and gives me goosebumps. Great example of how sound can have a bigger impact than the visuals in a horror film. I agree.
Yes.
But but no comment about who they chose. So, Meme City. And where do you live, Simon? I live in the weak and the wounded, Doc. Okay, come on, people. We're asking for you to kill someone.
Hey, any kind of engagement is welcome.
Oh, here we go.
Clarice Starling.
Here we go. My chunky Geordie. Never heard of this film, but Phil looks like a creep. Great video as always, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Freaky Taxi. I haven't seen this movie in a while, but I don't remember disliking David Caruso. That could be my CSI Miami bias, though. I'll vote Larry Fassbender. Even if it is my bias, LOL, might give this a rewatch sometime soon. As you should.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Amethyst Frost. Wasn't a fan of this movie, but I'm always grateful when you guys cover movies that slip under the radar and give them the discussion they deserve. Kill Phil. No reason except Craig's actor wrote/appeared in the great PS4 horror game Until Dawn, which also gave us a long-awaited role for Hayden Panettiere as the final girl, released in the period where we all assumed Kirby was dead. Can't muster as much excitement for something else David Caruso appeared in. I have no idea. I didn't know any of that, so thank you.
Me neither. Thanks.
Blue Box. I saw this movie a very long time ago and don't really remember the details. I do remember disliking Phil a lot, so I'm voting for him because I also get to say, how's it hanging, Phil?
Lovely. It was there. It was there.
Michael Vasquez. Phil. Damon.
Okay.
DeMonte Thomas. Zack, is it okay if you could do a episode on Sorority Row 2009 and Silent Number 1993 and Insidious Chapter 3 if it's possible? That's a lot of asks. We haven't even done Insidious 2.
Yeah, we'll have to.
I've heard a lot of people ask about Sorority Row.
Okay.
I've never seen the original. I would be interested in watching the original before I did a remake.
I think that's the one I fell asleep in, but yeah, I would do both. You know me. I'm game.
Yeah.
I'm game.
This is the poll where everyone took the opportunity to just like not engage with that. Yeah, just random things. Silent Saturn. I have yet to see the film. I flipped a coin. The universe chose Craig. Edit. I've seen the film now. Honestly, neither. Should have been Hank. But Hank was fun. Hank.
Remind me, which one's Hank?
Hank was Josh Lucas, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt bad for him though. What he went through, like he was kind of a shit when he was alive. But come on,
and
that's
then
harsh.
David Oswald, neither. But if I had to pick Phil, Craig didn't do a thing. Also, I don't know if did you mention this, but the actor who played Craig was the opening kill of You're Next, the neighbor, the professor who was sleeping with one of the students.
I didn't mention it. Maybe you did. I didn't.
I don't think I did. Someone mentioned it, but it's not on here.
Okay, cool. No.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know.
Cool. So you get first dibs on Silence.
Well, it immediately goes to one person, and it's not going to be any kind of like a surprise either. It's Dr. Frederick Chilton. Just the most loathsome man. He makes he's just, I use the word odious and it sticks. Perhaps Hannibal called him loathsome and it sticks. It's just like from his first frame of film we just confine it to this movie. His first frame of film, he is just dripping with condescension and lust and thinks he's so much sexier than he is, and it's like and then he gets immediately like all butthurt when Clarice wants to go in alone, and it's like, well, you could have I'm not even gonna say the line, that's just what I hear. And then when he feels left out of her investigation, which has nothing to do with him, he bugs the room, completely ruins everything that Clarice set up. with Jack Crawford to try and get Hannibal on their side to cooperate and everything. And granted, yes, it was dishonest, and he probably would have found out eventually, but God, Chilton, and he's the reason that Hannibal got free in the first place, and he's the first one that Hannibal wants to visit once he's kind of like scot-free and like, you know, living it up. I mean, I understand everyone in this movie looking at Chilton and is it deriding? Is that derision? Feeling derision for that man. That is a trash person. The world would be better if he just stopped living. And he's fictitious, so I feel comfortable saying that. Okay. So there you go. That's my choice.
Thank you. I guess I'll go for James Gum. Because why no S? You know? And that's literally the only reason.
That warrants a slow clap.
Why no S?
That is hilarious.
All right, you can vote your heart, vote your conscience. The poll is open on Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube. Again, if you would like to support the podcast, head over to Patreon. You do get the extra vote. You also get early access. And you can follow us on Instagram at the Cherry Picker Pod. If you are new to the Cherry Picker and you are watching us on YouTube, the RSS feed link is in the descriptions down below, so you can listen to us instead. Or if you are listening to us and you want to watch us, head over to YouTube and subscribe there. Edward, social media.
Edward is truth is the handle, traditional spelling, one word. YouTube, Letterboxd, Instagram. One of these days I'll release something on TikTok. So why don't you follow me there? How about you, Zack Cherry?
And you can find my main YouTube channel, Zack Cherry, ZackCherry. Instagram is at RetroBitchface. Twitter, Zack Cherry 8. Letterboxd, also Zack Cherry. I can't think of another thing to say. So, what do we got going on next week?
Is it the one that's a remake?
Yes.
And it's a remake of a holiday
yes.
film?
Yes.
Okay, so it's My Bloody Valentine 3D.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to make
cool.
sure.
Yeah, cool. So, we've run out of Valentine's movies to cover. But that is what's happening. Thank you, everybody, for watching and